We are live. Welcome, everyone. So glad. Show your live face, John. Awesome.
I have a live dance for you too, if you want.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, we were talking about that. So like,
I love it. You bring it all. And that's one of the things I love about you. Welcome, everyone. We are here today live talking about executive presence and power dynamics and authenticity and all the other buzzwords that make you really nervous to demonstrate your leadership skills. So I'm Lauren Lefkowitz. I'm a leadership coach. And I have with me fellow coach, John Spears. John, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I am a life coach as well, and I'm working with people who want to become fully expressed and be authentic and live the life that they've always imagined.
Love that. Yeah, we work on similar things, and I think all coaches who coach, whether the center is career, whether the center is life, whether the center is health or relationships, we all coach to get out of this like comfort zone that we've created for ourselves that isn't really that comfortable. But fear keeps us there because being there is a little bit more comfortable than being anywhere else. So, John, you and I have been in a coaching cohort this year, learning ontological coaching, which is the study of being. And for me, it's made me really think about what authenticity means. I always thought I was showing up fully, and learned as I've been in this cohort with you the last almost year, that I was showing up authentically in the specific areas where I was willing to show up authentically. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the questions that I think comes up all the time, especially in the corporate, nonprofit, government, office kind of work is, what does authenticity mean? And how do you relate to that when you hear the word authenticity?
Yeah, I have always loved this idea of authenticity. I remember moving to DC in 2005 and was always talking about being authentic. And I don't think I really understood what I was talking about then. I think for me, being authentic means being fully seen and fully expressing myself. And I think my journey with authenticity really goes back to childhood. And we're talking about coaching now, but this was something that I learned when I was in therapy, in one of my sessions with my counselors, that I felt really safe when I was not seen growing up, when like everyone was in bed, when I was alone in my room. And I think for me, the journey to be authentic started then, and it still is evolving, but it's about being fully expressed and being able to share my wants, my needs. I am in a C-suite position at an NGO, and I'm like the guy who like tap dances at it open, when you open up a live.
Yes.
And so this idea of being authentic, I think, is really about being comfortable with who I am and knowing who I am, knowing what I bring, what I don't bring, and being okay with all of that, and showing up fully in whatever situation that I find myself in.
I love that. And are you at a place where, like in your current career, is that something that's evolved, or have you been showing up as your authentic self for a long time?
Yeah, I think that has certainly evolved. We're talking about executive presence, and I don't want to sort of jump the gun there, but I think all my life, especially as being an out gay man, you're kind of told to be something different, to appear this way, to act this way, to come across this way. And for a long time, I kind of felt like being a respected leader or leading was like outside of my capacity, because like I don't like to wear suits. I'm like the guy who like wants to have fun, even in serious circumstances. And so I felt like that leadership was so inaccessible to me, and that I would never be this person that when I would hear executive presence or leadership, kind of it didn't feel like I fit. And it wasn't until I started moving in that direction of showing up and being okay with the fact that like I'm not going to fit a certain mold, that I actually like became more authentic. That it was sort of like, this is who I am. And it's sort of like, if this is not a good fit for me, I need to go somewhere else where there is a good fit. And that could be a really scary thing to sort of say, like, here I am, like, take it or leave it. And so it's been a journey, I would say, over the last 5 years of making this transition to sort of being more comfortable with who I am and really not comparing myself to other people and saying, like, what I bring is enough. And if it isn't, I need to go somewhere else where I can, or working with clients, right? I think with coaching, being who you are as a coach, it can be really at times scary or intimidating to say, like, what if this person doesn't want to work with me? Like, what if they want something else that's outside of my capability? But it's like, we want to work with those people who want to work with us because of what we bring. And so there's so much more power in that for ourselves, for other people, being authentic, especially being out and authentic. I think it gives visibility to it, and it encourages and inspires other people to show up authentically.
Yeah. My path to authenticity was a little slower. I early in my career worked for a really formal environment, like skirts no more than 2 inches above the knee and pantyhose and heels and the whole thing. And I thought that I had to become that authentically. And so when I moved on in my career and I found a more casual, more open environment, I had this opportunity to be like a little bit more me and show up a little bit more, with more humor, with more compassion, a little bit less robotic kind of in my approach. And it really wasn't until this last job, which I just left, but I was at for 6 years, where I walked into that job and I was like, this is who I am. This is what I do. I dress pretty casually. I have some fun. I'll make jokes. And I also take my job really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize when I was younger, I think, that you can do both. You can like fully be yourself, fully bring yourself in. You don't have to be work Lauren and home Lauren and work John and dad John and, and separate those roles and sort of segment. You can really come in and show everybody who you are. And I'm a better leader for it because I became more human to people, even though, being in human resources for so many years, there was like a veil that kept you from being fully human. I really had this opportunity as leader to say, like, I get sick too, or sometimes I don't feel like doing my job, or, I'm going to cut out early because today just feels terrible. And it gives you this opportunity when you're really willing to be fully yourself, to fit in to the places that fit you. And I think you said it, like, if this place doesn't fit me and if this place wants me to be a different way, then it's not the place for me. And that felt like a long lesson for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lauren, I'm curious.
Yes,
you mentioned the shift that happened of like becoming authentic, thinking about becoming authentic by doing externally. I'm wondering what did it give you access to when you sort of just like were able to walk in confidently and say, like, this is who I am. I'm like fun Lauren, but I take my work seriously, and etc.
Yeah. Well, there was actually there were a lot of realizations internally that, like, I was working really hard to be work Lauren for a long time and to be like very professional and super filtered. And I was respected and I was a leader, and, I was doing all of the work and getting somewhere. What I learned when I started opening up a little bit more and being a little bit more me and not having to think so hard about, like, what group am I with? How should I be in this group? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? Like, my whole life just got easier. And it really came to a head in 2019 when I had an accident and I was in the hospital and in a physical rehab center for a bunch of months. And I started blogging about that experience, and it had like some stories in it and some language and, some jokes that I wouldn't have normally told at work. And I shared it with work. And when I came back, it was like just a much more like human, engaged, compassionate environment that I was also living in. I wasn't just like handing out compassion. I was also willing and able to receive it. And
Yeah.
people were willing to give it to me because I didn't have this sort of stoic, like, I'm fine, everything's fine, kind of way about me. So it got more comfortable inside to not have to like work so hard to be a certain way and do certain things. Yeah.
Huh.
Great question. Yeah.
Can I go on a little rant about executive presence for a minute? Is that okay with you?
Rant away.
Because you just mentioned something that I think is the heart of at the matter of the problem I have with the way we talk about executive presence. So look, I'm sure there's some variation and I'm making a really big generalization. So I want to be really clear that I know that I'm doing that. But when I hear executive presence and I hear people talking about executive presence, I often hear a real strong focus on how you're projecting, how you're being, like, you're confident, you have everything in control, you don't get thrown off by anything, you're able to command respect. It's this real, like, a lot of these external actions or sort of how you like give off. And there's no mention of like what's happening in here. There's no mention of actually like feeling peace as a leader or feeling calm as a leader or being able to sit with uncomfortable feelings in a meeting, or what happens when you're having a hard time with a colleague or a partner or something. And so when you talked about that, when you just mentioned this idea of like feeling something shift internally, I think that's what we should be talking a lot more about, is how are we being as leaders, as opposed to how are we just projecting? Because I know some great leaders who, I should say, I know a lot of people who have great executive presence and who like treat their staff like crap, or who inside they're a mess. And so I would love for us to reorient our conversations around like being a leader, being empathy, being calm. And I think to your point, like, it just gives other people access to so much more, like for a long time, as I was coming up in my career, I felt like there was just this divide between me and a leader, or what a leader was considered, because I was always was able to say, hey, I don't know what to do here. I was able to, and when I was managing just a few people, say, hey, I don't know what the right answer is. What's the right answer? And I never saw that modeled. So I felt like a fraud. I was like, well, I'm in this situation. I have no clue what to do. And I guess like my last resort is to ask my team for help. Whereas I think that should be our first instinct, to say, hey, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Help me out here. I mean, it promotes diversity of opinion. It promotes buy-in. It also shows that like as a leader, you don't have to have it all together. So
yeah,
this is my crusade, I think.
Yes, I love it. So I heard you say a lot of bits and pieces about what you see as executive presence. And there's, I think, this sort of mainstream coming up the ranks kind of vision that executive presence means you know everything. You don't have to ask anybody for help. You know how to manage your teams. You know the right answer at all times. You don't get involved in the little stuff. That's not your area anymore. And you talk, peer to peer with the C-suite. If you're not in it, then you're managing up and you're doing it all right? There's so much that comes with rightness as part of executive presence. And you just brought up not knowing, which is like a very real, very proactive way to manage, because you don't know everything. We don't know everything. And there's this sort of duality of executive presence being the person who stands up in front of the room and they're the leader, they're in charge, they're wearing the most expensive suit, they've got their hair and makeup done, whatever the thing is that makes somebody look like executive presence. And then they speak to their staff in a way that you think like, ooh, that's not the nice way to talk to people. And so when you think of what the sort of outside view of executive presence is, and what your view of executive presence and my view of executive presence is. Where do you think that breakdown is? Why do you think we're not getting that right?
Why do I think as a society we're not getting that right?
As like a corporate society, why do you think that frankly, jerks, right, get promoted to the top, right? And there are laws and regulations around a lot of protections, which still frankly get broken, but there's no jerk law, right? There's no jerk regulation that says, like, if you're a jerk, these are the potential consequences. You get to be a jerk if you want to be a jerk. A lot of jerks get promoted to the top. So how do you bring your authenticity into executive presence and like be an all-around decent person who also gets to get promoted through the ranks?
Yeah. Lauren, that's a really good question. I think to the first part of your question, I think as a society, we often focus on the external, right? It's looks and appearances, right? It's like keeping up with the Joneses, even if your life is falling apart, even if you don't have the money to be able to keep up with this certain lifestyle, piling on credit card debt, and just sort of keeping up the appearances. It's the same thing in, I think, with people and relationships. There's just this real focus on how things look on the outside, curated Instagram stories. There's just it's our fascination, I think, as Americans or as humans with this idea. And so I think the anecdote for that is to really begin to focusing on like the person and who we are as people. Obviously, to be a leader of an organization, you need to have skills and you need to be able to lead and make decisions and have good judgment and be kind and all those things. But I think there's that other layer that often people don't consider, which is people working on themselves to become what I would just call fully expressed, to be able to be more authentic, to understand their weaknesses, to understand their trigger points. I'm not perfect. Talk to some of the people on myself. I'm very open about the challenges that I have and the struggles that I have around certain areas. And I think being open about that does two things for me. It holds me accountable. If I'm open about something, I know that other people are there to support me and I can trust. And I think it also gives other people access to be able to say, hey, I don't know the right answer, or hey, this is who I am authentically, and to be able to support them. I'm also a super big believer on diversity and bringing different voices and experiences in the room, because ultimately that gets a better product or a better experience for people. I'm really clear that my experience is so different from other people's, and it doesn't make my experience invalid or superior to other people's. It's just one piece of data to consider when you're making decisions. And so, I think so the last question I think that you asked is, taking this kind of stand can feel really scary.
Yeah.
To say, like, to be fully expressed. I know that, like, and I would say this is probably a generational thing, because I think when I look at my kids who are 10 and 12, they're like seeing their friends who are just being themselves, and they're not afraid, and their friends are so accepting of them. I think that's something that I didn't necessarily have when I was growing up or sort of entering the workforce. But I would say, like, do it scared anyway. And to find your people in organizations, or to find people who are also really interested in being authentic and who are showing up authentically. And I think having that kind of a support in a workplace or in a community is so important, because it spurs courage and community, and you just don't feel so alone in that.
Yeah, it's true. It's it brings us, I think, to our third topic, which is power dynamics. We stuffed a lot into today's live, right? Which is that as you're coming up as a newer employee, as a more entry-level person, and you're looking towards leadership, And people say like, oh, well, you have to have an executive presence, which has 400 different meanings as we've discovered, or you know, just be confident, be yourself, be more this, be more that, right? And then we get a piece of feedback from somebody who we perceive as higher level than us in the power dynamic lineup. And we create in our minds this authority for these other people. And I think about early on in my career, as I was coming up in leadership, I had a bad manager. I mean, we've all had bad managers. This was a particularly bad manager who told my peers that he would never promote me because he didn't like me. Now, how somebody could not like me, I don't know. Never discovered the truth on that one, but there was
shocking. I honestly am shocked by that.
He was doing unscrupulous things with other employees, and I brought it up to higher levels of management, and the feedback I got was, "Well, are you sure you're not getting promoted because of your own work?" And I knew that was not the case. But to hear that feedback from a higher level than that higher level, and to hear that it must be me and not this leader, because this person's a leader. And if he's the leader, then he's the authority. He's got the power. You know, my power dynamics in that situation went from, you know, he's here and I'm here to even further apart, and made me feel really small. And I took that, right? And I internalized that. And then I later learned, like, oh, all these people are flawed, right? Like, he was flawed as a manager. He was making some poor decisions. The person who I spoke to had a friend relationship with him and wanted to defend him. That was a flaw as well. And that's okay. But it was no longer my job to hold that I was doing something wrong. And I think when we create these power dynamics of you're higher level than me, you're more than me, you've been here longer than me, that we make ourselves smaller to accommodate that. And that's the opposite of what our opportunity is to create executive presence. It's to take in that feedback, the positive, the negative, the feedback that resonates, the feedback that doesn't, and decide what you want to do with it, and then show up anyway. So it's like you said, John, like getting out of that fear bucket of stuff that's just like, oh, I'll just stay here in my little corner because it's safe here and I don't have to take any risks. It's the people who take the risks at any level. It's the people who take feedback and decide what to do with it, where to put it, what to internalize, what to use to move forward in a new way. But I see so many people being held back because they perceive that others are above them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's totally right. That's spot on. And I think that dynamic, you know, we in coaching, we talk about, you know, things only have the power or the influence that we give them, that we ascribe to them, right? So if we think something's really important in our own framework, we will elevate it. And we'll make it, allow it to influence stories that we have about ourselves, or, you know, go into interpretation. And I think the reality is, as we're coming up, we're going to have lots of experiences where it's going to challenge us in many ways, but particularly around showing up authentically. And people are going to have to choose between, do you want to take the easy way? Do you want to just like go down the stream and just sort of follow what everyone else is doing? Or do you want to become fully expressed? And I keep on using that word. I just mean, do you want to show up fully? Do you want to be the fullest expression of who you are? And, you know, we always hear these like really silly, I mean, they're not silly actually. These trite sayings of like, there's no one else like you in the world. Like you're unique. Like you can change people's lives. And I totally am like, I believe them. Like I have a whole thing of like those things up on my wall of like, you know, sticky notes that say things about, you know, how I want to show up. It's like all over here. But the truth is, like, when we don't, or for me, the truth is, when we dim that, when we dim ourselves, when we hide who we are, when we don't give other people access to that, or ourselves access to that, that impact is dimmed. And so there's just, I think there's so much power in us showing up, not only for ourselves, but for other people when we walk into a room, to our friends, to our family. If we're not fully expressed, it both impacts us and our sense of fulfillment and confidence and etc. But also it doesn't give other people access to it. And I say that in a very positive way, not in a like we should just give access to ourselves to anyone. I don't mean it that way, but into that power of who we are that only Lauren Lefwitz can bring to the table, only I can bring to the room, only whoever is watching can bring to the room. And so, I would encourage folks that are struggling with this to think about the impact not only on themselves, but also in their community and in the world.
Yeah, I think, I talked a little bit about how we create these dynamics, and I used to take improv classes, and there was this exercise of the power dynamic, and you would each be assigned a role. John, you're a king, and I'm a court jester. Go, right? And because of the status that's been assigned to you, I am the below person. I'm the lower level person. I'm subservient. And I think in our work lives, we've created this corporate structure where you're an employee, then you're a manager, then you're a director, a VP, and the list goes on, and 100 steps in between. And we've assigned rules to these titles. And the truth is, when you have a good manager that you're reporting to, when you're on a positive, proactive, authentic team, the power dynamic gets handed around, right? And everybody has a chance. But if you have decided already that you're the lowest rung on the ladder, I'm using like a lot of mixed metaphors here. If you've decided that you're the lowest rung on the ladder, then you are, right? There's a quote that I'm going to butcher that I think was Henry Ford, which is like, whatever you think is true, or whatever you think you can't do, you're right. Something like that. It's, real butcher there. But so we're making decisions based on what we perceive is our level. And the people I've seen be the most successful, and my greatest success has been in not being afraid of anybody. And knowing that, like, at this moment, yes, you're my boss, I'm your subordinate. But if we're driving down the road and you have a flat tire, now I'm the boss, right? The power dynamics can shift. And so if you think about that in the workplace, if I'm the boss and you're the employee and your idea is better than mine, or your skill set is better than mine, or your knowledge is better than mine, you have all the power. You have all the opportunity. We have a comment.
I love this comment.
From Facebook user. I'm sorry that I can't see your name. StreamYard has a funny way of blocking your name unless you give them special permission. But it says, great conversation. I succeeded more as a professional when I was more authentic. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Lauren, like, why do you think that is?
What do I think? Which part? I just said a lot of things in a row. I have a lot to say.
Facebook user comment. No, yeah. I think this idea that we are more successful when we're authentic. I'm really curious, maybe what you think about that.
I think that's especially true now. I think 20 years ago, when frankly straight white men were coming up the ranks and being promoted because they were straight white men, and that's what you did, authenticity wasn't valued. It was, this is the structure that we want you to fit into. This is the job description. Do that. And now, go be in your job. I think over the last 20 years, and especially over the last 5 years, I've seen that there are more Gen Xers in leadership. There are more millennials in leadership. And we're more exploratory, I think. And this is not like a grand statement on every boomer or every older Gen Xer, but I think as generations shift, culture shifts, and there is more value in the workplace placed on bringing you in and being the same you that you are at work as you are at home. And that full expression that you were talking about of yourself, the authenticity, when you're speaking from a place from in here, where you know what your strengths are, you know what your abilities are, you know how to connect, and you actually bring that into the room and you don't hold it back and you don't put it in a package and leave it outside the door, you're bringing just this like wealth of knowledge and sharing and capability that other people don't have or don't have in exactly the same way. And, you know, John, we've talked before about like what happens when you're in a room, right? And sometimes I'll talk to my clients about that. Like, what happens in a meeting that you're in that wouldn't have happened if you weren't there?
Mm-hmm.
And people can pinpoint, my clients can pinpoint like when they've been authentic in a room, what happens, and recognize what difference that makes and what a positive impact that can make.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, John, we've covered a ton. We've just come up on a half hour. Any final thoughts?
You know, I would say that this journey on authenticity and much like any positive personal growth is a continual process of recommitting to it. It's not like I'm authentic and like just like just for the rest of your life you just walk around being authentic. It is a daily commitment to that. It is in situations where you find yourself being uncomfortable, in new situations where there is oftentimes can be some concern around being authentic. And so I think I would encourage folks that are listening, and for us, Lauren, to remember to constantly recommit to showing up fully and to being authentic, to being fully expressed.
And there's always stuff to learn. I've been learning a whole lot this year that I never knew before about myself, about other people, about how the world works. And all of that has been amazing and can be integrated into my authentic self for the pieces that apply. So when you're at work, like look around you. What do you like that other people are doing? And do you have that in you and you're just not expressing it? But to be able to be wholly you at work and in life is just really freeing. And it's worth dipping into that fear in order to see what's available for you. We got another comment. If you're nervous about being authentic, start with small steps. Then you build your confidence. Absolutely. Yeah. Part of the reason that people hold back so much, I think, is because there's this fear that if you're too much or you show too much of yourself, that you'll be rejected for it. So test the waters out. Dip your toe in the water. Try cracking a joke where you wouldn't have normally cracked a joke. Try making a suggestion where you normally wouldn't make a suggestion in a meeting or on a project. You know, put your hands on your hips and stand up tall and, you know, do the Wonder Woman pose or the victory pose and just show people that you're there, that you're in the room and you're ready to be there. And every small step you take, integrate that as part of you and as part of your stuff. Man, we're getting some another comment.
I love these comments. I'm like, keep
Jessica, awesome. Yes, totally worth dipping into that fear. You will gain so much more when you are authentic. Yes, thank you, Jess. That is absolutely true. Jess is somebody who I've worked with in the past who always came in authentic and so much value in just knowing up front who we are and what we're there to bring to the table. Yeah, absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much. This has been amazing. You're Lauren, one of my favorites.
You are one of my favorites. I love this.
I could talk about you and with you all day. But before we close, tell our audience who you serve, who your client is, and where they can find you.
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Both of those handles are John J. Spears. You can just Google me too. I'm sure the stuff will come up. And I'm really working with leaders who want to become more fully expressed at work, who want to be more authentic, who want to show up more fully in their lives. One of my favorite quotes ever that really got me into coaching and I remember this being a focal point is it's by Henry David Thoreau, and it says, "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you've always imagined." And so I want to work with people who want to live the life that they've always imagined, but find themselves stuck, find themselves in a place where they need some support. And so when I talk about leaders, I'm really talking about everyone. We're always, regardless of who you are, you're influencing people. So for those of you, regardless of where you are on the spectrum in a hierarchy and organization, if you're a leader or want to be a leader, I want to work with you to support your growth in that area.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And you can find me right here on LinkedIn, where you're probably watching me. And I work with the people who serve the people at work. So the HR folks, operations, the C-suite, the people who are making sure that the people at work and the customers are well served. And mostly I work with people who are in a cycle of working too much, and they've gotten into this trap of being fine. And so I work with them to break patterns, decide who they want to be when they grow up, and take those tiny steps to get there.
Awesome, Lauren.
Amazing. Thanks so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.
All right. See ya. Bye.